"You're too young and clumsy for this kitchen." The words exploded from Chef Marco Benedetti's mouth like artillery fire, cutting through the controlled chaos of the Las Vegas International Hotel's premier restaurant kitchen during the dinner rush. His voice carried over the sizzle of sauté pans, the clatter of plates, and the urgent calls of behind you and hot pan that normally orchestrated the evening service like a well-rehearsed symphony. 22-year-old Tommy Rodriguez froze mid-chop, his knife suspended over a pile of precisely diced onions, as every eye in the kitchen turned toward the confrontation unfolding at the main prep station. The humiliation was instant and complete, delivered with the kind of public cruelty that transforms a workplace into a battlefield and reduces grown men to feeling like scolded children. Tommy's hands trembled slightly as he set down his knife, the weight of 40 pairs of eyes burning into him as his fellow kitchen staff tried to pretend they weren't witnessing his professional execution. The expensive French knife that had taken him 3 months to save for seemed suddenly heavy in his grip, a symbol of culinary ambitions that Marco was systematically destroying with every harsh word. What Marco didn't know, what none of Tommy's colleagues knew, was that the young cook standing before him with downcast eyes had been working double shifts for the past 8 months, sending every paycheck directly to St. Mary's Hospital to cover his mother's chemotherapy treatments. Tommy couldn't afford to make mistakes, he couldn't afford to show weakness, and he absolutely couldn't afford to lose this job, no matter how many times Marco chose to humiliate him in front of the entire kitchen staff. What neither of them knew was that their confrontation had reached the ears of someone whose presence in the hotel would transform this moment from a simple workplace abuse into a profound lesson about leadership, respect, and the difference between building people up and tearing them down. Elvis Presley had been sitting at his usual corner table in the restaurant's main dining room, enjoying a quiet dinner between shows at the hotel's main theater. The open kitchen design that allowed diners to watch the culinary performance had always fascinated Elvis, who appreciated any form of artistic collaboration and had often compared kitchen service to the coordination required for a successful concert. But tonight, instead of witnessing the harmonious dance of professional cooks working together to create exceptional cuisine, Elvis was observing something that reminded him of the ugliest aspects of the entertainment industry. Talented people being destroyed by those who confused fear with respect, intimidation with motivation. Marco's voice had been rising steadily throughout the evening, his frustration with the dinner rush translating into increasingly harsh treatment of his staff. Elvis had watched the kitchen's energy shift from collaborative professionalism to tense anxiety as Marco's mood darkened and his criticism became more personal and destructive. The breaking point had come when Tommy, working frantically to keep up with the pace of orders while maintaining the precision that fine dining demanded, had accidentally knocked over a small container of expensive truffle oil while reaching for a saucepan. The spill was minor, easily cleaned, and the kind of mistake that happened in busy kitchens every night. But Marco's reaction had been swift and disproportionate. "You're too young and clumsy for this kitchen," Marco had shouted, his words carrying clearly through the service window to where Elvis sat, fork halfway to his mouth, watching a young man's dignity being publicly shredded over a simple accident. Elvis set down his fork and leaned forward slightly, his attention now completely focused on the drama unfolding in the kitchen. He had seen this dynamic before in recording studios, on movie sets, and in the music industry generally. Powerful people using their position to humiliate and control those beneath them, justifying cruelty as maintaining standards or teaching respect. Marco Benedetti, at 55, was a classically trained chef who had worked in some of Europe's finest restaurants before coming to Las Vegas to run the International Hotel's flagship dining establishment. His credentials were impeccable, his culinary skills undeniable, and his reputation for running a tight kitchen well established throughout the city's hospitality community. But his management style belonged to an earlier era of kitchen culture, when head chefs ruled through intimidation and young cooks were expected to endure abuse as part of their professional education. Marco had learned to cook under chefs who screamed, threw pans, and treated kitchen staff like soldiers in a culinary army where questioning authority was grounds for immediate dismissal. Marco's approach to leadership had been shaped by his own experiences as a young cook in the kitchens of Rome and Paris, where he had endured verbal abuse, physical intimidation, and constant criticism from head chefs who believed that breaking down young cooks was necessary to build them back up into competent professionals. He had been humiliated, reduced to tears, and made to feel worthless by chefs who told him he was too slow, too stupid, too clumsy to succeed in professional kitchens. Those experiences had hardened him, but they had also taught him that kitchen hierarchy was maintained through fear, and that respect came from the ability to withstand verbal assault without showing weakness. Now, as head chef of one of Las Vegas's most prestigious restaurants, Marco had unconsciously recreated the same toxic environment that had nearly driven him from the culinary profession during his own apprenticeship. He told himself that his harsh treatment of young cooks was necessary, that it prepared them for the realities of professional kitchen service, that it separated those with genuine commitment from those who were merely playing at being chefs. But what Marco didn't understand was that his approach was destroying rather than developing talent, that his constant criticism was creating anxiety instead of excellence, and that his public humiliations were driving away promising young cooks who might have become exceptional chefs under different leadership. Tommy Rodriguez represented everything that Marco claimed to want in his kitchen: dedication, willingness to work long hours, attention to detail, and genuine passion for culinary arts. Tommy had graduated from culinary school with honors, had worked his way up from prep cook to line cook through pure determination, and had dreams of eventually opening his own restaurant where he could serve the Mexican-American fusion cuisine that reflected his cultural heritage and culinary creativity. But Tommy's dreams had been temporarily set aside when his mother, Isabella Rodriguez, had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 18 months earlier. The diagnosis had changed everything for the Rodriguez family, transforming Tommy from an ambitious young chef into the sole breadwinner responsible for supporting his mother's medical treatment, while his father worked double shifts at a construction company to make ends meet. The Las Vegas International Hotel job had been a godsend for Tommy, offering better pay and more stable hours than the smaller restaurants where he had previously worked. The position also provided the kind of high-level culinary experience that could advance his career once his mother's health situation stabilized, and he could focus on professional development rather than immediate financial survival. But Marco's treatment of Tommy had turned what should have been a valuable learning opportunity into a daily ordeal of public humiliation and constant stress. Tommy found himself walking on eggshells during every shift, second-guessing every decision, and living in fear of the next explosive outburst that would mark him as incompetent in front of his colleagues. The psychological pressure was affecting Tommy's performance, creating a vicious cycle where Marco's criticism made Tommy more nervous, which led to more mistakes, which provoked more criticism. Tommy was beginning to doubt his own abilities and question whether he had what it took to succeed in professional kitchens. The evening's confrontation had begun earlier in the shift when the restaurant had received an unusually large number of reservations due to Elvis's presence in the hotel, attracting additional guests who hoped to catch a glimpse of the famous performer. The increased volume had put extra pressure on the kitchen staff, and Marco's stress level had been elevated from the moment service began. Tommy had been assigned to the sauce station, one of the most demanding positions in the kitchen, where he was responsible for preparing the complex reductions, emulsifications, and garnishes that distinguished fine dining from casual restaurant service. The position required perfect timing, absolute precision, and the ability to coordinate with multiple other stations while maintaining the quality standards that the restaurant's reputation demanded. Under normal circumstances, Tommy was more than capable of handling the sauce station's demands. His technical skills were solid, his palate was well developed, and his understanding of classical technique was thorough. But the combination of increased volume, Marco's escalating criticism, and his own exhaustion from working double shifts had begun to take its toll. The first mistake had been minor, a hollandaise sauce that had broken slightly due to temperature fluctuation, requiring Tommy to quickly re-emulsify it before service. Marco had noticed immediately and delivered a sharp criticism that was heard throughout the kitchen, setting a tone of tension that affected everyone's performance. The second mistake had been more visible. Tommy had momentarily confused two similar-looking reductions, sending the wrong sauce with a lamb dish before catching the error and correcting it. Marco's response had been louder and more personal, questioning Tommy's ability to handle the station's responsibilities. The third mistake, the knocked-over truffle oil, had been the breaking point that triggered Marco's explosive outburst about Tommy being too young and clumsy for the kitchen. The words had been intended to establish dominance and control, but their effect had been to create a moment of toxic workplace abuse that was witnessed by the entire kitchen staff and overheard by Elvis Presley in the dining room. Elvis had continued watching the aftermath of Marco's outburst, observing how the kitchen's energy shifted from collaborative professionalism to fearful tension. He could see other young cooks glancing nervously at Tommy, clearly worried that they might be next to face Marco's wrath. He could see the older, more experienced cooks looking uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge their head chef's authority. Most importantly, he could see Tommy struggling to maintain his composure while continuing to work, his movements now tentative and uncertain. The dynamic reminded Elvis of his own early experiences in the entertainment industry, when powerful producers, directors, and executives had used fear and intimidation to control young performers. He had seen talented musicians destroyed by managers who believed that breaking people down was necessary to build them back up. He had witnessed the psychological damage caused by leaders who confused cruelty with strength and authority with abuse. Elvis had also experienced the opposite kind of leadership, mentors who had guided him with patience and encouragement, who had helped him develop his talents through support rather than destruction, who had shown him that true authority came from inspiring others to achieve their best rather than making them afraid to make mistakes. The contrast between these two approaches to leadership had shaped Elvis's own philosophy about how to treat people, especially those who were younger or less experienced. He had learned that building people up created better results than tearing them down, that encouragement fostered creativity, while fear stifled innovation, and that respect was earned through wisdom and guidance rather than intimidation and control. As Elvis continued observing the kitchen's toxic dynamic, he made a decision that would transform not just Tommy and Marco's relationship, but the entire restaurant's understanding of what effective leadership really meant. Elvis quietly excused himself from his table and made his way toward the kitchen's entrance, his movement attracting immediate attention from both diners and staff who recognized the famous performer. His presence in the dining room had been discreet and unobtrusive, but his movement toward the kitchen created a stir of curiosity and excitement. The kitchen's service entrance was typically restricted to staff members, but Elvis's status at the hotel ensured that his presence anywhere in the building was welcome. As he approached the kitchen doors, several waitstaff members noticed and began to alert their colleagues that Elvis Presley was about to enter their workspace. Marco looked up from his station as Elvis appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression shifting from irritation at the interruption to surprise and nervous excitement at the unexpected celebrity visit. The entire kitchen's energy changed instantly as staff members realized that one of the world's most famous entertainers was standing in their workplace. "Good evening," Elvis said pleasantly, his voice carrying easily over the kitchen's ambient noise. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Marco quickly wiped his hands on his apron and stepped forward, clearly flustered by Elvis's presence but trying to maintain professional composure. "Mr. Presley, what an unexpected honor. I'm Marco Benedetti, the head chef. Is there something we can do for you?" Elvis's response was diplomatic but pointed. "I was enjoying my dinner at table 12, and I couldn't help but notice the incredible energy in your kitchen. It reminds me of the coordination required for a successful concert. Everyone has to work in perfect harmony, or the whole performance falls apart." The comment was delivered with genuine appreciation, but Elvis's eyes had already found Tommy, who was still standing at the sauce station, clearly uncomfortable with the attention and uncertain about how to respond to having Elvis Presley suddenly appear in his workplace during the middle of a difficult shift. "Music and cooking have a lot in common," Elvis continued, addressing the comment to Marco but speaking loudly enough for the entire kitchen to hear. Both require technical skill, creative vision, and most importantly, teamwork. The best performances happen when everyone supports each other and works together toward a common goal. Marco nodded enthusiastically, pleased by Elvis's apparent praise of his kitchen operation but not yet understanding that Elvis's comments contained an implicit criticism of the leadership style he had just witnessed. "I've been fortunate to work with many talented people over the years," Elvis went on. "Musicians, producers, sound engineers, stage crew. I've learned that the best results come from environments where people feel supported and encouraged to do their best work." Elvis's gaze moved deliberately toward Tommy, who was trying to remain inconspicuous while continuing to work on the evening sauce preparations. "I've also learned that everyone, no matter how talented they might become, started somewhere as a beginner. The difference between those who succeed and those who give up often comes down to whether they encounter mentors who build them up or people who tear them down." The kitchen had gone notably quieter as Elvis spoke, with staff members pausing in their work to listen to the impromptu philosophy lesson from one of America's most successful performers. Marco was beginning to sense that Elvis's comments were more pointed than they had initially appeared. "Mr. Presley," Marco said somewhat defensively, "running a professional kitchen requires maintaining very high standards. Sometimes that means being firm with staff members who aren't meeting expectations." Elvis nodded thoughtfully, as if considering Marco's perspective. "I understand the importance of standards. In the music business, there's no room for mistakes when you're performing live in front of thousands of people, but I've found that there are different ways to help people meet those standards." He gestured toward the busy kitchen around them. "What I see here reminds me of conducting an orchestra. Everyone has a different part to play. Some are more experienced than others, but the music only works when everyone feels confident enough to contribute their best effort." Elvis's attention turned directly to Tommy, who had been listening to the conversation while trying to continue working. "What's your name, son?" Tommy looked up, clearly nervous about being singled out. "Tommy Rodriguez, sir." "How long have you been working in professional kitchens, Tommy?" "About 3 years, Mr. Presley. I graduated from culinary school 18 months ago." Elvis smiled encouragingly. "That's not very long in a profession that takes a lifetime to master. What made you want to become a chef?" The question caught Tommy off guard, partly because he hadn't expected to be engaged in conversation by Elvis Presley, but mostly because he couldn't remember the last time anyone in the kitchen had asked him about his motivations or aspirations rather than just criticizing his performance. "I grew up helping my grandmother cook traditional Mexican dishes," Tommy said, his voice gaining confidence as he talked about something he was passionate about. "She taught me that food was a way of showing love and bringing people together. I wanted to learn professional techniques so I could create dishes that honored my family's traditions while meeting fine dining standards." Elvis nodded approvingly. "That's a beautiful goal, combining cultural heritage with professional excellence. I bet your grandmother would be proud of how far you've come." Around the kitchen, other staff members were watching this interaction with interest, seeing their often criticized colleague being treated with respect and genuine curiosity about his background and aspirations. Marco, meanwhile, was growing increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Elvis's questions were highlighting aspects of Tommy's character and background that Marco had never bothered to learn, despite working with the young cook for nearly a year. "Tommy," Elvis continued, "what's the most challenging part of working in a professional kitchen?" The question put Tommy in a difficult position because answering honestly would require acknowledging the hostile work environment that Marco had created, while deflecting would miss an opportunity to connect with someone who seemed genuinely interested in understanding his experience. Tommy glanced nervously toward Marco before answering carefully. "The pace can be intense, especially during busy services, and there's always pressure to maintain consistency while trying to improve your skills." Elvis understood the diplomatic nature of Tommy's response but recognized the underlying tension it revealed. "I imagine it's especially challenging when you're still learning. In the music business, I've found that the best mentors are those who remember what it was like when they were starting out and who create environments where people feel safe to take risks and learn from their mistakes." The comment was clearly directed at Marco, who was beginning to understand that Elvis had witnessed enough of the kitchen's dynamics to form opinions about his management style. The realization made Marco defensive but also curious about where Elvis was heading with his observations. "Mr. Presley," Marco said, "I'm curious about your perspective on maintaining discipline and standards in creative environments. Surely you've had to be firm with musicians or band members who weren't meeting expectations." Elvis considered the question seriously before responding. "You're absolutely right that standards matter. I've worked with musicians who were struggling with timing, vocalists who couldn't hit their notes, and band members who weren't prepared for performances. But I learned early on that there's a difference between helping someone improve and making them afraid to try." He paused, looking around the kitchen at the faces of staff members who were clearly invested in this conversation. "When someone makes a mistake in one of my recording sessions or during a live performance, my first question isn't how can I punish them? It's how can I help them understand what went wrong and do better next time?" Elvis's attention returned to Tommy. "Tommy, when you make a mistake in the kitchen, what helps you learn from it and improve?" Again, the question put Tommy in a delicate position, but Elvis's encouraging tone and genuine interest gave him confidence to answer honestly. "When someone explains what went wrong and shows me the right way to do it, I remember the lesson and I'm less likely to make the same mistake again. But when I'm just told I'm doing something wrong without understanding why, I get more nervous and that makes me more likely to make mistakes." The admission resonated throughout the kitchen because every staff member had experienced the same dynamic. Marco's habit of criticizing without teaching was creating a cycle of anxiety and error that made everyone's job more difficult. Elvis nodded with understanding. "That makes perfect sense. Fear makes people tense up, and tense people make more mistakes. Confidence helps people relax and perform at their best level." He turned back to Marco with a direct but respectful challenge. "Marco, you've obviously achieved a lot in your career to reach this position. You must have had some great mentors along the way. What did the best ones do that helped you develop your skills?" The question forced Marco to reflect on his own professional development and to consider whether his current approach to leadership resembled the mentoring that had helped him succeed. The truth was that Marco's best learning experiences had come from chefs who had combined high standards with patient teaching, who had pushed him to improve without destroying his confidence. "The chefs who helped me most were demanding but fair," Marco admitted reluctantly. "They showed me not just what I was doing wrong, but how to do it right. They gave me opportunities to redeem myself after mistakes." "And how did that make you feel about your work?" Elvis asked. "It made me want to prove myself worthy of their investment in my development," Marco said, beginning to understand the contrast Elvis was drawing. "I respected them because they treated me like someone worth teaching rather than just someone to be controlled." Elvis smiled, pleased that Marco was beginning to make the connection. "It sounds like they understood that their job wasn't just to maintain standards but to help you develop into someone who could meet and exceed those standards on your own." The kitchen had become notably quiet as this conversation unfolded, with staff members recognizing that they were witnessing a masterclass in leadership philosophy from one of the entertainment industry's most successful figures. "Tommy," Elvis said, returning his attention to the young cook, "you mentioned that you're supporting your mother through school and work. That takes a lot of dedication and sacrifice. How does that responsibility affect your approach to your job here?" The question touched on territory that Tommy had been keeping private, but Elvis's respectful tone and obvious genuine interest encouraged him to open up about his situation. "My mother is receiving cancer treatment," Tommy said quietly. "This job isn't just about building my career, it's about making sure she can get the care she needs. Every day I come here knowing that my performance directly affects my family's financial security." The revelation had a profound effect on everyone who heard it, including Marco, who was learning for the first time about the personal circumstances that made Tommy's job performance a matter of life and death rather than just professional ambition. Elvis's expression showed deep respect and admiration for Tommy's commitment to his family. "That's an incredible responsibility for someone your age. Your mother must be very proud of your dedication and sacrifice. She worries that I'm giving up my dreams to take care of her," Tommy said, his voice catching slightly with emotion. "But she taught me that family comes first, and that the skills I'm learning now will still be valuable when her situation improves." Elvis nodded with profound respect. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman who raised a son with strong values. The fact that you're able to maintain your professional commitments while supporting her through such a difficult time shows remarkable character and strength." The encouragement had a visible effect on Tommy, but it also created an uncomfortable moment for Marco, who was beginning to understand that his harsh treatment of Tommy had been directed at someone who was already carrying an enormous personal burden. "Marco," Elvis said, turning back to the head chef with a more serious tone, "now that you know more about Tommy's situation, I'm curious whether it changes your perspective on how to help him succeed in your kitchen." The question forced Marco to confront the uncomfortable reality that he had been adding unnecessary stress to the life of a young man who was already dealing with more pressure than most people could handle. The recognition created a moment of genuine remorse that was visible to everyone watching. "I didn't know about his mother's situation," Marco said quietly. "If I had known, would you have treated him differently?" Elvis asked gently but directly. Marco considered the question seriously before answering. "I should have treated him differently regardless of his personal circumstances. My job is to develop talent, not destroy it." The admission represented a significant breakthrough in Marco's understanding of his role as a leader, but Elvis wasn't finished with the lesson he was determined to teach. "Let me share something I learned early in my career," Elvis said, addressing both Marco and the entire kitchen staff. "Every person who works with you has a story that you don't know. They have dreams they're pursuing, challenges they're facing, people they're supporting, fears they're overcoming. Your job as a leader isn't just to get the best performance out of them. It's to help them become the best version of themselves." Elvis's voice took on the tone of someone sharing hard-won wisdom rather than offering simple criticism. "I've worked with thousands of people over the years, musicians, sound engineers, producers, stage crew, hotel staff. The ones who gave me their best work were the ones who felt respected, supported, and valued as human beings, not just as functions to be performed." He gestured toward the busy kitchen around them. "What I see here could be one of the most positive work environments in Las Vegas. You have talented, dedicated people who care about their work. You have a leader with extensive experience and knowledge. You have everything you need to create something special." Elvis's attention returned to Marco with a direct but respectful challenge. "The only question is whether you want to lead through fear or through inspiration. Both approaches can get short-term results, but only one creates the kind of loyalty and excellence that lasts." The kitchen remained quiet as staff members absorbed Elvis's words and waited to see how Marco would respond to being challenged so directly, albeit respectfully, about his leadership approach. Marco looked around at his staff, seeing them perhaps for the first time as individuals with complex lives and personal motivations, rather than just workers to be controlled. He saw Tommy, who was risking his career dreams to support his mother's medical treatment. He saw Maria, the prep cook who had been working extra hours to save money for culinary school. He saw James, the dishwasher who was supporting 3 children while attending community college at night. "You're right," Marco said finally, his voice carrying a sincerity that surprised everyone who heard it. "I've been so focused on maintaining standards that I forgot my responsibility to develop people. I've been recreating the worst aspects of my own training instead of the best." Elvis nodded approvingly. "Recognition is the first step toward change. And change is possible at any point in your career." "Tommy," Marco said, turning toward the young cook with an expression that was completely different from the harsh criticism of earlier in the evening. "I owe you an apology. My treatment of you tonight was unprofessional and unfair. You're dealing with more pressure than anyone your age should have to handle, and instead of supporting you, I've been adding to your stress." Tommy looked surprised by the apology, having never expected to receive such acknowledgement from the head chef who had been making his work life miserable for months. "Furthermore," Marco continued, "I want you to know that your dedication to your family while maintaining your professional commitments shows exactly the kind of character that makes great chefs. Your technical skills are solid, your palate is developing well, and your work ethic is exceptional. I should have been helping you build on those strengths instead of focusing on minor mistakes." The transformation in Marco's approach was so dramatic that it left the entire kitchen staff somewhat stunned. Elvis, however, recognized it as the natural result of helping someone understand the disconnect between their values and their behavior. "That's exactly the kind of leadership that develops excellence," Elvis said with obvious approval. "When people feel supported and valued, they naturally want to live up to that support." Elvis then addressed the entire kitchen staff. "I want all of you to understand something important. The work you do here matters. You're not just preparing food, you're creating experiences that people will remember. You're working together as a team to achieve something that none of you could accomplish individually. That makes each of you valuable and worthy of respect." He paused, looking around at faces that were clearly moved by receiving recognition for their contributions. "But more than that, each of you has value as a human being that goes far beyond your job performance. You have families, dreams, talents, and potential that deserve to be recognized and supported by the people you work with." Elvis's attention returned to Tommy. "Tommy, I want you to remember that supporting your mother through her illness while building your culinary skills doesn't mean you're giving up your dreams. It means you're developing the strength and character that will make those dreams even more meaningful when you achieve them." Tommy felt tears beginning to form in his eyes, not from sadness but from receiving the kind of encouragement and recognition he had been desperate to hear, but hadn't dared to hope for. "And Marco," Elvis said, turning back to the head chef, "you have an opportunity to create something special here. You have the knowledge and experience to develop exceptional chefs. You have staff members who are willing to work hard and learn. You can choose to be the kind of mentor who inspires people to achieve more than they thought possible." Marco nodded with genuine commitment. "I want to be that kind of leader. I want to create an environment where people can grow and thrive." Elvis smiled with satisfaction at the transformation he had witnessed. "Then you will. Leadership is a choice you make every day, with every interaction, with every decision about how to treat the people who work with you." The kitchen's energy had completely transformed during the course of Elvis's visit. The tension and fear that had characterized the evening service had been replaced by a sense of possibility and mutual respect that was visible in everyone's posture and expressions. "Now," Elvis said with a lighter tone, "I should let you all get back to creating the exceptional dining experience that brought me here in the first place. But before I go, I want to make one more observation." He gestured toward the organized chaos of the active kitchen around them. "What you do here really is like conducting an orchestra. Every position is important. Every person has to contribute their best effort, and the final result depends on everyone working in harmony toward a shared goal." Elvis's eyes moved from person to person as he continued. "But the most important thing about an orchestra isn't the individual instruments, it's how they support and complement each other. The best performances happen when everyone feels confident enough to contribute their unique talents while staying connected to the overall vision." The analogy resonated throughout the kitchen because it captured exactly what they had been missing under Marco's previous management style. The competitive, fear-based environment had been preventing the kind of collaboration that Elvis was describing. "Marco," Elvis said, "your job is like being a conductor. Your responsibility isn't to play every instrument, it's to help each musician understand how their part fits into the larger composition and to create conditions where everyone can perform at their highest level." Marco absorbed the analogy with obvious appreciation for its accuracy and relevance to his leadership challenges. "That's exactly what I want to achieve. I want to help everyone understand how their contribution matters to our overall success. And Tommy," Elvis said, addressing the young cook directly, "remember that every great chef started exactly where you are now. The challenges you're facing today are developing the skills and character that will serve you throughout your entire career." Tommy nodded with renewed confidence and determination. "Thank you, Mr. Presley. This conversation has meant more to me than you could know." Elvis smiled warmly. "It's been my pleasure. I have tremendous respect for people who work as hard as you do while managing difficult personal circumstances. "Your mother is fortunate to have such a dedicated son." As Elvis prepared to leave the kitchen and return to his dinner, he paused for one final comment that would become part of the restaurant's culture for years to come. "Remember," he said, addressing everyone present, "success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about lifting others up and creating something together that's better than what any of you could accomplish alone." The kitchen staff watched as Elvis made his way back to the dining room, leaving behind an environment that had been fundamentally transformed by his intervention. The toxic atmosphere of criticism and fear had been replaced by a sense of mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence. Marco immediately began implementing changes to his leadership approach that reflected the lessons he had learned during Elvis's visit. Instead of leading through intimidation and public humiliation, he began focusing on teaching, encouragement, and developing each staff member's individual potential. Tommy, meanwhile, experienced a complete transformation in his work experience. No longer operating under constant fear of criticism, he was able to relax and demonstrate the culinary skills that had brought him to the hotel in the first place. His confidence returned, his technique improved, and his creativity began to flourish under Marco's new approach to mentorship. The change in kitchen culture had immediate effects on the restaurant's overall performance. Staff members who had been working in fear began collaborating more effectively. Communication improved as people felt safe to ask questions and offer suggestions. The quality of food preparation increased as cooks were able to focus on excellence rather than simply avoiding mistakes. Most importantly, the kitchen became the kind of place where talented people wanted to work and develop their careers. Word spread throughout Las Vegas's culinary community that the International Hotel's kitchen had become a positive environment for professional development under Marco's transformed leadership. Tommy's mother, Isabella, made a full recovery from her cancer treatment 6 months after Elvis's visit to the kitchen. By that time, Tommy had been promoted to sous chef, a position that provided better compensation and greater responsibility while allowing him to mentor other young cooks who were just beginning their careers. Marco became known throughout the hospitality industry as a chef who developed exceptional talent through positive leadership and supportive mentoring. Several of his former staff members went on to become head chefs at other prestigious establishments, and they consistently credited Marco's guidance and encouragement as crucial factors in their professional success. The story of Elvis's intervention in the kitchen conflict became legendary among hotel staff and eventually spread throughout the entertainment and hospitality industries as an example of how thoughtful leadership could transform toxic work environments into places where people thrived. Elvis continued dining regularly at the restaurant throughout his Las Vegas residencies, often taking time to visit the kitchen and check on Tommy's progress and Marco's continued development as a positive leader. These visits became highlights for the entire staff, who appreciated Elvis's genuine interest in their professional growth and personal well-being. The lesson that Elvis had taught that evening, that true leadership meant helping people become the best versions of themselves rather than simply controlling their behavior through fear, became a guiding principle not just for Marco's kitchen, but for management practices throughout the hotel and eventually other properties in the hospitality chain. Years later, when Tommy opened his own restaurant specializing in the Mexican-American fusion cuisine he had dreamed of creating, he made sure that his kitchen culture reflected the lessons he had learned from watching Elvis transform Marco's understanding of leadership. His restaurant became known not just for exceptional food, but for being a place where young chefs could develop their skills in a supportive, encouraging environment. Marco, meanwhile, became a sought-after consultant for restaurants looking to improve their kitchen culture and staff development practices. His transformation from an intimidating, fear-based leader to an inspiring mentor became a case study used in hospitality management programs and leadership training courses. The evening when Elvis Presley walked into the kitchen and taught everyone present about the difference between leadership and intimidation became a defining moment that changed not just individual careers, but an entire organization's understanding of how to create environments where people could thrive while achieving exceptional results. The legacy of that conversation continues to influence how restaurants and other organizations think about leadership, mentorship, and the responsibility that comes with authority over others' professional development and personal well-being. The documentary about the kitchen transformation, produced 5 years after Elvis's intervention, became a landmark study in workplace leadership and organizational culture change. The film featured extensive interviews with Tommy, Marco, and other staff members who had witnessed the dramatic shift from toxic hierarchy to collaborative excellence. Tommy, by then head chef at his own successful restaurant, spoke movingly about how Elvis's recognition of his character and circumstances had restored his confidence and renewed his passion for culinary arts. His restaurant, Isabella's Kitchen, named in honor of his mother who had made a full recovery, became known throughout Las Vegas for both exceptional Mexican-American fusion cuisine and an extraordinarily positive workplace culture. Elvis showed me that my worth wasn't determined by my worst moments or my biggest mistakes, Tommy reflected in the documentary. He saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself, and he helped Marco understand that developing that potential was more important than punishing my limitations. Marco, who had become a respected consultant for restaurant leadership development, used his transformation story to help other chefs understand the difference between maintaining standards and destroying morale. His consulting work had helped dozens of restaurants improve their kitchen cultures while actually increasing their performance standards and food quality. I thought leadership meant being feared, Marco admitted in his interview. Elvis taught me that real leadership meant being trusted. When people trust you to help them grow instead of waiting for them to fail, they give you their best effort because they want to succeed, not because they're afraid of punishment. The hospitality industry began incorporating the Elvis model of leadership development into management training programs, emphasizing the importance of understanding employees as complete human beings rather than just job functions. The model proved particularly effective in high-pressure environments where traditional authoritarian approaches often created toxic cultures that drove away talent. The International Hotel's Kitchen became a case study in organizational transformation, with business schools and management consultants studying how a single intervention could create lasting cultural change that improved both employee satisfaction and operational performance. Research conducted by hospitality management programs showed that restaurants implementing collaborative leadership approaches similar to those Elvis had advocated experienced lower turnover rates, higher employee engagement scores, better customer satisfaction ratings, and ultimately stronger financial performance than establishments maintaining traditional hierarchical management styles. The story resonated particularly strongly with immigrant families and first-generation Americans who recognized Tommy's struggle to balance cultural heritage with professional ambition while supporting family members facing medical or economic challenges. His success story became an inspiration for young people facing similar pressures to choose between personal dreams and family responsibilities. Isabella Rodriguez, Tommy's mother, became an advocate for families dealing with cancer diagnoses, speaking at support group meetings about the importance of accepting help from children and community members while maintaining hope for recovery. Her experience taught her that strength sometimes meant allowing others to sacrifice for your well-being, just as she had sacrificed for Tommy throughout his childhood. The annual Excellence Through Empathy Awards ceremony, established by the Las Vegas Restaurant Association, honored both culinary professionals who demonstrated exceptional mentorship and establishments that created positive workplace cultures. The awards were directly inspired by Elvis's intervention and continued to reinforce the principles he had demonstrated. Culinary schools began incorporating emotional intelligence and leadership communication into their curricula, recognizing that technical cooking skills alone were insufficient preparation for the collaborative teamwork that modern professional kitchens required. Students learned about creating supportive learning environments alongside traditional techniques for sauce preparation and knife skills. The orchestra analogy that Elvis had used to describe effective kitchen coordination became standard language in culinary education, helping students understand that professional cooking success depended on listening to others, supporting teammates, and contributing to shared goals rather than simply demonstrating individual technical proficiency. Marco's transformation influenced a generation of chefs who went on to open their own restaurants with management philosophies, emphasizing employee development, collaborative decision-making, and recognition that personal circumstances affected professional performance. These establishments consistently achieved better staff retention and higher performance standards than competitors using traditional authoritarian approaches. The kitchen staff who had witnessed Elvis's intervention became ambassadors for positive workplace culture throughout their subsequent careers, carrying the lessons they had learned to other restaurants and hospitality establishments. Their influence helped spread collaborative management practices far beyond the original location where the transformation had occurred. Today, more than 45 years after that transformative evening in the Las Vegas International Hotel's kitchen, the story continues to inspire leaders in all industries who face choices between ruling through fear and leading through inspiration. Tommy's success story proves that supporting employees through personal challenges creates loyalty and excellence that benefits everyone involved. Marco's evolution from intimidating taskmaster to beloved mentor demonstrates that leadership styles can be changed at any point in a career, and that the most respected authority figures are those who use their power to elevate others rather than to control them through fear and intimidation. The evening when Elvis Presley walked into a toxic kitchen environment and transformed it into a model of collaborative excellence remains a powerful reminder that true leadership means helping others become the best versions of themselves, and that success is measured not just by individual achievement but by the positive impact we have on the people around us. In an era where workplace culture and employee well-being have become central concerns for organizations across all industries, the story of Elvis, Tommy, and Marco offers timeless lessons about the kind of leadership that creates environments where people can thrive while achieving exceptional results together. The legacy of that single conversation continues to influence how we think about authority, mentorship, and the responsibility that comes with having power over others' professional development and personal well-being in workplace environments around the world.